So, hello everyone again. This time we're only quickly diving into a little project I prepared for understanding listeners in game audio in general, or FMOD in a more specific way better. Because listeners at the end are the question, where is audio picked up from in your game world? For this I reused the Lemon Microgame. I think Unity calls it stealth game or something. You might be familiar with it if you've already watched other videos on my channel. This specific project as well is downloadable in the GitHub repository, which I linked below. Feel free to mess around with it yourself or watch just this video or follow along. Normally for listeners you would just slam them on your game camera and go ahead, and that works wonderfully for first person things. So for this, I've actually added the option to switch between camera positions in this little demo game with Shift and the num keys. So I'm now pressing Shift 1 to switch to first person. And if we, for example, walk closer to the shower, now hear the shower, and it's getting panned accordingly to how we look at the shower. So it's now to our right, we hear it from our right, and the other way around as well. So the different options I established here in this demo project you find in the upper right corner, or is the listener position on camera or on the player, don't really matter because now camera and player are at the exact same position. Same thing for the rotation, because both camera and player rotation are equal to one another. Nevertheless, if you press 4, you get a little visualization of the left and right position of our current listener and where audio is picked up from. But this gets a lot more complicated if we're not having a game with first person, but for example third person. So for this I'm going to press Shift 3, and now we're switching to third person. Here you can already see that the headphones are located on the player model itself. That underlines that option of listener position on player. And as well, if I'm now rotating the camera, you will notice that the headphones look like they're not matching how like a model would normally wear headphones, because when we're rotating the camera, the listener is turning with it. So now, you still hear the shower from our right, because this is how we're looking into the game world. And maybe another approach to it would be to have the listener rotation with the player model itself. So with that I'm going to switch to that with Alt and 2. And now you see that when I'm rotating the camera, the listener isn't rotating, but only when the player moves. And as you already hear when I'm walking closer to the shower and just wiggling around with the player model, that it's getting really all over the place, because sound positioning is changing every time our character moves. Especially this jumping from left to right, even though you're expecting to see the shower in front of you, can be horribly confusing. So for third person you normally would stick to having the rotation on the camera. Just the second thing to experience. The other option is that the listener position isn't actually on our player, but on the camera. So I'm switching to that with Control 1. And now when you notice that I'm walking in and out from the shower, it does get louder and quieter, but it still feels sort of off. The weird thing is, if I'm now moving the camera, like the camera is now closer to the shower, because yeah, the shower is right behind us, now the shower is louder, which in a way is really off and unexpected in a way as well, but more disputable at least. Like, you can still sort of get where sounds are coming from. And lastly, to switch through, if we're now having listener position on camera and listener rotation with the player, it really gets confusing as hell, because we have this effect of the player wiggling around and that changing in specialization, and we have a like distance attenuation depending on our camera. So that's probably not really what you want for a 3D game. Lastly, as a, let's say, camera perspective example, we have the common John Lemon top-down perspective. And probably the first thing, which might be really confusing, is now, when we're approaching the shower, we're only hearing it really distantly and quite away. This is happening because our camera is quite far away, like above the game world somewhere, I don't know, maybe 10 units or something, above our actual camera. And that means the sound source is then that much more quiet to the sound we have on our camera. And actually, additionally, if we now come close to the ghost, when it's moving below the camera, because the camera is a bit further back than our player, it should become more audible when it's further in the back. Yeah, the sound is really, really quiet, sadly, but you maybe get the idea. So I'll be switching to another listener position, with the listener being on the player. And again, you now notice that when the player model is turning, the shower is coming from a different direction, just because we're rotating the listener with the model. That's again really confusing because our camera perspective stays locked and we just expect the shower to be somewhat centered and not flipping around back and forth. So maybe for those top-down isometric and even 2D perspectives, I would switch to listener rotation with the camera. So that means in our scenario that the listener rotation is sort of locked. Now when I'm walking with the character, you notice that the visualization of the headphone is actually not changing anymore. So the shower now depends on, or the panning of the shower now depends on if I'm more to the left or to the right of it. This works as well for the ghost, for example, which we can hear on the right side with the sort of vibrato synthy sound, and additionally with those little guys producing like a little stone rumble. Perfect. So there's like multiple sound sources which you can check out to understand how listener position and rotation is affecting your perception of the game with different camera perspectives. And additionally, you can always toggle on and off the visualization of how the listener behaves via those headphones, which have like the left and right channel visualized with the number 4. So I hope that's somewhat useful for you to understand how listeners in game audio work, and maybe help to get you started in the overall field. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully see you soon.